What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and today we're going to take a look at Now There Are Two of Them. This is a really interesting card from the new Twilight of the Republic set for Star Wars Unlimited TCG, and I think it's poised to make a big splash in the meta. Let's take a closer look. So Now There Are Two of Them is a 3-cost cunning event. It has the Trick trait. If you control exactly one unit, play a non-vehicle card from your hand that shares a trait with the unit you control. It costs 5 less. And this is a really cool card, and it's already kind of making some waves because it allows you to potentially play powerful units earlier in the game than you would normally be able to. So a common thing you could do is on turn 1, you play a 1 or a 2 cost unit, and then on turn 2, you play Now There Are Two of Them and play a 5 cost unit discounted by 5. That's some major acceleration. Now, you could use it in later turns, but it doesn't work if you don't have any units or if you have 2 or more units. So it kind of naturally fits into that flow early on. The restriction that it doesn't work on vehicles does limit some of the potential targets for this card, especially for the end game. So you're not going to be able to use this to bring out an Avenger 2 turns early or whatever, but a vehicle can start the effect. It just can't end the effect. So if, like, let's say you wanted to use this with the Rebel trait. I don't actually think that's a great idea, but if you started off with an Alliance X-Wing or a Graydon Squadron A-Wing, that is a vehicle, but you could still play Now There Are Two of Them, target your vehicle, and then bring out another Rebel unit as long as the second unit you brought out was not itself a vehicle. And then the Trick trait on here does synergize with the Jabba the Hutt unit from set 1 as well. So that's a little positive interaction there. And the early units need to share traits with Now There Are Two of Them targets. So here's an example. You can have Grogu. He has the Force trait. You play him on turn 1, turn 2. Now There Are Two of Them. And you bring out Plo Koon because he shares that Force trait. They don't have to share all the traits. They just have to share a trait. So Grogu isn't a Republic unit, but you can still use him because he shares the Force trait. Similarly, if you played, some trooper that had the Republic trait but not the Force or Jedi traits, you could still use that to bring out Plo Koon because Now There Are Two of Them would see the Republic trait on both of those cards. So that's an example of that's just an example of how this interaction works. And in order to make this more consistent, you're going to probably want to have a bunch of your units sharing traits with the targets, maybe even all your turn 1 plays sharing traits with the targets. Not all traits actually have good targets for Now There Are Two of Them. That's the other interesting part. So these are the 5-cost units that are valid targets if you're in the Rebel trait. Vigilant Honor Guards, Wedge Antilles, and Zeb Aurelius. None of these are really cards that people are super hyped to be playing. In fact, none of them are really seen play in competitive builds these days. So if you're playing Now There Are Two of Them, you might think, oh, I'm going to throw this into Sabine and I'm going to get a 5-cost unit out on turn 2. It's going to be crazy. If that 5-cost unit's Zeb, you could try it, but it might not have the impact that you're immediately thinking. Some potential strong targets actually just can't benefit from it. So Poe Dameron here on the left, Sabine players would love to be getting Poe on the field on turn 2, but he only has the resistance trait, and I believe there aren't any 2-cost units with the resistance trait. So he's just not really a valid target. The Adelphi Patrol Wing here, potentially would be a good target if you could bring it out. Let's say that you played some other fighter and then you used it to bring out the Adelphi Patrol Wing, but you can't do that because it is a vehicle. Since all current space units are vehicles, Now There Are Two of Them doesn't work in space at all. And on the right, the Snowspeeder here isn't a space unit, but it's still a rebel on the ground, and ground vehicles also can't benefit from this, so you can't use that, even though it would be probably a better target than some of those other rebel units that I was looking at earlier. So there are some real restrictions with this card. It's not something you can just slot into any deck and have it immediately be good, but in the right situation, it can be very powerful. Where does this card end up being the best? So I personally think, at least for right now, it seems to me that the best targets for it are underworld units. So you have, Zuckuss, Bosk, Syndicate lackeys. Those are some good examples of underworld units you can bring out with Now There Are Two of Them. You could potentially have other targets, in a heroism version. There are other things that you could potentially get for it. Zuckuss wouldn't really be Zuckuss wouldn't be a good target. Maybe you could get Zori Bliss or something. But the other main one that I've seen is from the new set. It seems to me that there are a lot of good targets for Republic. And you might wonder why I'm not mentioning Separatists. There are actually some good potential targets for Separatists, but I think Separatists can bring out strong units faster, more easily just through the exploit mechanic than through now. There are two of them, and some of the things that you might want to bring out are also vehicles for Separatists. So that's it. That's a potential problem. But for me, I think using it with the Force, Jedi, and Republic traits for heroism builds, you could get out Plo Koon, you can get out the new Anakin Skywalker unit, Ki-Adi-Mundi. There's other things you could potentially get as well, especially later on in the game, or with the Underworld trait for powerful units like Zuckuss. As I was saying, Zuckuss, the Syndicate Lackeys, Bosk, that sort of thing. Those seem to be the best applications that I've seen for it right now, but I'm sure there's other people who might find other ways in which the card can be used. So currently I'm excited about it in Cunning Villain and in Cunning Heroism kind of Republic-oriented decks. Now, you can, even if you have a deck like that, you still want to do some other stuff to make the card more reliable. So filter and search effects early in the game can improve your consistency. R2D2 full of solutions here is great. So I was in my Force 5 deck for Anakin. I was using now there are two of them with all my starting units. All 12 of them had either the Force trait for Grogu or the Republic trait for R2 and my two fighter units of 3 copies each. And then I had the Anakin unit and Plo Koon as my targets. And because they would share either the Republic trait or the Force trait, all of my starters were valid for all of my targets. And that really helps increase the consistency of this card, in my opinion. Plus R2's filtration and search can help create situations where you draw into the pieces that you need. I think it's probably not worth running this card if you only have 3 potential targets or if your starters don't really line up that well. I think it's just not going to be as consistent as you want it. And it can be kind of a bad draw later in the game if you have a more established board. One thing I will say, though, is that if you're aiming for a later game play, that might also help you set it up more easily. So let's say you're thinking, okay, what I want to do is get a 7 cost unit out early. So I'm going to try to engineer this scenario. And that might give you, just some more time to have draws and filtration and so on and get the combination set up. But the thing to be careful about that is that if you get too big of a board, you might end up blocking yourself because you have to have exactly 1 unit to play this. So, if you're hoping to play that 7 cost Maul or whatever 2 turns early, but you end up with like, I don't know, Crafty Smuggler and then your leader deploys, well, you may have kind of deprived yourself of the opportunity depending on how exactly it works. So while the late plays can go bigger than 5 and can potentially be quite impactful, you do have to be a little more careful about setting them up, in my opinion, but that is something to consider. So, this card lets you potentially get a powerful card out much earlier than you'd be able to normally. What are the downsides and what are the weaknesses? So here are some counters. The number one really big counter is bounce effects. So if I do my now there are two of them thing and my opponent just plays Waylay, my unit gets bounced to hand and I can't replay it. And I most likely can't replay it next turn because I just won't have the resources. So the Waylay has really set me behind. This middle one is kind of a funny counter. So Jesse is a unit that actually creates battle droids for your opponent. And because he does that, he can potentially ruin your opponent's now there are two of them play. So let's say, your opponent plays some unit, you have something in the opposite arena, you think they're going for now there are two of them. If you play Jesse on the next turn, well, now they have whatever they had initially plus these 2 battle droids. They can't actually use their card, and you may have sort of disrupted their combo. And then lastly, Fell the Dragon. This isn't the only removal card that you can use, but it's one that's unusually well suited to killing a powerful unit that your opponent has gotten out early. I think most of the targets people are going to be going for with this card are going to have 5 or more power. So Fell the Dragon, maybe they do their combo, but next turn you're able to clear their unit with Fell the Dragon. That seems like a nice potential solution as well. And I'm sure as things go on, we'll see some more stuff. There are also other things that you can potentially do. If you have a Tarkin Town deck, you can send a relatively cheap unit into their big unit and then clear it with Tarkin Town. No Good to Me Dead could be used to stun the unit for multiple turns, during which time the game is kind of ramping up and you're getting more powerful cards out yourself to counter it. But these are kind of some things that came to mind as quick counters, especially the bounce effects, which are really good. One thing that I was liking in some of the test games that that I was doing for that Force 5 Anakin build, was that, you know, I would find myself in a scenario where both of us use, now there are two of them maybe, but I also have Waylay in that build, and Waylay was a great counter to those now there are two of them plays. So those are just some thoughts on the card, why it's good, how to counter it a bit. And I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think this card is really good? Do you think this card is not consistent enough to see competitive play? Do you have nice trait synergies or setups with it that I didn't mention? I'd be interested in hearing from you in the comments below. And yeah, that's going to about do it for this one, guys. Thanks to you all for watching. We'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content, and I will catch you guys later.